been a lot of interest in the electrification of transportation of late, and we all have a pretty good idea of what's going on with light duty vehicles, such as passenger cars. But the real action coming up over the next 5 to 10 years is in heavy duty vehicles. And we're talking about electric buses, delivery vans, and long haul electric semi trucks. So we're going to talk to Scott Shepard of Guidehouse Insights, who's just completed a study on this. So welcome to the interview, Scott.
Hi, Markham. Thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to be on your show once again.
Well, look, why don't we start with an overview of your study, please?
Certainly, yeah. So our study is one that we do biannually or every 2 years. And it is a forecast of global markets for electric trucks and buses. And so our forecasts are meant to give a good understanding of where the market's headed 10 years from now. And it's informed by policy decisions, by technology, cost economics, and automaker roadmaps. Essentially, what our findings are that the direction of the electric truck and bus industry has accelerated much more significantly than what we've seen in the past. There have been significant developments from a policy perspective that are driving this growth, and we expect significant growth primarily from electric trucks, and that's the big change between prior forecasts and this forecast.
Yeah, e-buses have been growing for at least the last 5 years. China has huge fleet of e-buses, and we're seeing it now take off in North America. And we've seen some delivery vans, like Amazon's purchase of, I think it was 100,000 delivery vans, electric delivery vans that they're going to have by 2030. But it's those big trucks. That's the thing I think that's caught everybody by surprise. And you say that the pandemic actually has had an impact on how people have been thinking about big trucks.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily anything that the pandemic did to the big truck environment. It's more of what the pandemic did to electric vehicles generally. So basically, before the pandemic, a lot of analysts looked at the electric vehicle market and saw some vulnerabilities tied to oil price declines, limited government ability to spend money, or prioritization of those funds towards other fronts rather than electric vehicle subsidies and market development. And to some extent, some of those things did occur, but to a larger extent, the market responded to the pandemic with much stronger numbers than we expected. And that was primarily driven by policies, government policies for fuel efficiency regulations. And the difference there is that between prior to the pandemic and after is that we see now the effect that these policies can have on the market. And therefore, we expect that government bodies, now with this insight into the effectiveness of their policies, will only continue to press these policies more as a driver. The difference with electric trucks is that the policies became much more significant over the course of the year, not necessarily tied to the pandemic. And what I'm talking about here is primarily California's introduction of a zero emissions truck policy in that vein. And so once that came out, it was only a few months afterwards that the truck industry really started to increase their activity in electrification, rolling out plans that they had been working on for years, fast tracking development of, the next day cab or sleeper cab truck, and the development of the charging infrastructure to support these vehicles.
Now, I would imagine that the decline in battery costs and the increase in battery energy density that we've seen over the last little while, and that are forecast to continue fairly dramatically through the 2020s, will have a significant impact on the cost of big trucks and their rate of adoption.
Yeah, certainly. That is a significant driver of it. The economies of scale that we expect, in a large part driven by what's happening in the light duty vehicle market in regards to battery cells, is important here. But an added component to it is not necessarily the costs, which are getting better and will be quite attractive 10 years from now, even 5 years from now. They're constantly becoming more attractive is the point. But outside of that advantage, the other component specific to heavy duty trucks is that the batteries are not only improving in cost, but in how durable they are. And that's going to be really important as the charging infrastructure to supply long haul heavy duty trucks rolls out. What industry is looking at is charging of over 1 megawatt, or a charge point that can supply 1 megawatt or more to a heavy duty electric truck to enable that long haul over the road semi truck. And those types of power capacities with the existing battery technologies are a little bit scary. But with stronger batteries, which are the same ones that are going to be more energy dense, there is the greater technological security that these will work and be useful in the existing traditional operations that trucks are used for now.
So if I understand this correctly, based on conversations I've had with battery scientists, we're looking at something like solid state batteries, which are you can charge them quicker and they're safer. And if not that right away, there'll be other advances in battery technology, so that the long haul trucker can pull up to the charging station and charge the battery in fairly quick time. This won't be hours. And be assured that those batteries are safe. And then that's got to be reassuring to the industry. That's what the industry is looking for, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, and it's a concerted approach, or I guess a multi-pronged approach, in that they're developing the batteries at the same time that they're developing the high power charging infrastructure for these vehicles.
Yeah, it's have you got a sense of the willingness of utilities in different jurisdictions like Europe, the US, Canada, and maybe parts of Asia, the willingness of the power utilities to invest in the infrastructure that's required to support the charging infrastructure?
Yeah. So generally, I'd say the utility interest has always been a little bit, how'd you put this? Observant in a way, not necessarily excited, not necessarily worried, but patient and there to support what occurs. I would say that with the electric truck industry, and specifically with the megawatt charging systems, that they are a lot more interested in electrifying transportation, because it means significant build-outs of capacity. And significant development of equipment. And there are a lot of new innovative technologies that are being developed to support charging of this norm, as well as to allow utilities interesting ways to help support transportation electrification of this magnitude. So one term that's coming up a lot lately is DC as a service, which is effectively the centralization of certain components of charging infrastructure in what would be financed by the utility, and then the site host would pay back the cost of that equipment through the service that is provided by the utility. So there are technological developments that utilities see as attractive and helpful to their business model.
Scott, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Mm-hmm.